There's probably one cut of beef, in particular a steak, that I'm pretty sure most of you guys are neglecting, and it's absolutely delicious. No, it's not ribeye or filet mignon. Let's dive in. So a really popular steak that I absolutely love, and if you can get it at your local grocer, butcher, whatever, you should really try. It's actually Steak Picanha. Steak Picanha is actually a rump cut, and in particular, it's an area of the cow or the animal where there's not a whole lot of movement, but there's a lot of fat. So you usually get this really great fat cap that adds a lot of flavor, and the meat itself is extremely tender. This cut was made famous in Brazil, and it's actually the steak of Brazil. Very delicious, very flavorful cut that's oftentimes referred to as the queen of steaks. So how do you prepare steak picanha? It's a lot easier than you think.
Before we can talk about seasoning, we have to understand the picanha cut, because unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I want to make sure you guys are getting exactly what you paid for. When you go to your local grocery store or even butcher, especially in the United States, they may not know what picanha is, but if you mention a very specific portion of the cow, which is the rump roast, your butcher or grocery store should know exactly what you're talking about. They're going to take the rump roast and cut them into individual picanha steaks, which are extremely versatile and can be prepared in many different ways. But what exactly is picanha, and how do you know you're actually getting a true picanha cut? The picanha cut can be identified through 3 veins. The first will be located near the point of the picanha, the second will be about 4 to 6 inches from that, and then even further 4 to 6 inches will be the third vein. Everything past that third vein is not really picanha. It's still very flavorful, but it's not a true picanha cut. You can also feel the difference. If you run your fingers from that first point all the way to the third vein, you'll notice that just beyond that third vein, the meat will feel a bit different and less malleable. And finally, the grain structure is a big indicator. But beyond the third vein, the grain structure becomes thicker and more tough. The grains are larger. The spacings between them appear to be as well. So make sure you identify a true picanha cut and educate your local butcher. And you can get picanha with or without the fat cap, but I highly recommend the fat cap because it adds loads of flavor. Speaking of the fat cap, I like to start off seasoning picanha by doing a dry salt brine. And I always start off with the fat cap, making sure it has plenty of salt. Now this might look excessive, but it's not, trust me. Because when we go to cook picanha, we want that fat cap to caramelize beautifully. And then I just continue to salt both sides. You want to use a coarse salt, like kosher salt or sea salt and so forth, not table salt. And likewise, I like to keep things simple, but sometimes I do like to add a steakhouse buttery rub if I'm in particular going to be cooking picanha for a person that's never had it before. But add any extra seasoning after you've allowed the picanha to dry brine overnight.
Now you might be tempted to cook picanha on the gas grill. Don't be. This is one of those things where you really do have to use a charcoal grill to get maximum flavor. And picanha is best cooked on a charcoal grill. So there's many different ways to cook picanha. Today we're going to be doing it kind of the fancier method, which you'll commonly see in restaurants, Brazilian restaurants in the United States, which is on the rotisserie. But picanha isn't traditionally necessarily cooked on the rotisserie like US restaurants tend to lead you to believe. You'll be surprised to find that traditionally in Brazil, it's cooked like any other steak using the reverse sear method. But that's the beauty of picanha. It's extremely versatile. So as I mentioned earlier, I do have a group of friends that are coming over to try picanha for the very first time. So I am gonna use the Steakhouse Buttery Rub. Picanha is really interesting. It's sort of like filet mignon. It has a very meaty flavor, but it also mimics ribeye because of that fat cap, which makes it extremely versatile with almost any rub that you throw at it. And this particular group of friends, half of them really love ribeye, but hate filet mignon. The other half really loves filet mignon and thinks ribeye is overrated and so forth. I personally like to keep things simple with salt and black pepper after it's done cooking because I want to taste that meaty flavor. I want to taste the complexity. So I figured we'll do what most United States restaurants do, and we'll just go with a little bit more enhanced rub. So you're probably wondering, how do you get that restaurant look, right? The picanha on the skewers, they bring it out to you, they carve it right in front of you. It's really, really cool, quite fancy, and it's actually really easy. Just make sure when you are placing the picanha on the rotisserie or the skewer, whatever it is that you're using, just arc it. Give it a nice little arc. Traditionally, it's placed on this like sword-looking kind of flat skewer. Rotisserie, very traditional in Southern America, Mexico, very common in the Middle East, shawarma, think shawarma. But I'm just gonna use my regular squared off rotisserie. It's gonna give me the same effect. It's gonna give me a larger hole, which I'm not too crazy about, but it should work out just fine. Okay, so I made a mistake, first mistake. Make sure you guys ask your butcher to cut the picanha at least 1.5 inches thick if you want to do the skewer rotisserie method. These were too thin. I wanted to go down this rod. Another reason why traditionally it's not using a squared off rotisserie. It was way too thick. The rod was way too thick. I didn't have enough meat on the steaks, so it just wouldn't go through. So I ended up using the chicken rotisserie part, or the rotisserie that holds everything together. It should work just fine. Just make sure you're getting rotation. If you're not getting rotation, then you're not going to get a good cook, but this should work out just fine. Likewise, another thing that you want to do that I highly recommend, this is going to be too hot. Make sure you split the coals in half so you have kind of like a nice bed in the middle where you're going to put the rotisserie, so everything can get cooked evenly. You don't want it too hot. You want it kind of like on both sides. Something else I kind of want to mention with steak picanha, and in general with the rump roast, a lot of people confuse it with tri-tip. Tri-tip and picanha are two different things. Now, you can actually mix picanha and tri-tip if you wanted to, and make kind of like a shawarma or tacos out of it. I've done that before where I've had picanha and tri-tip cooking, and it kind of goes well together, they mix well. I think the picanha's fat content kind of flavorizes the tri-tip, and the tri-tip has a very specific taste to it, so it's delicious, but they're not the same thing, so keep that in mind. So admittedly, the cut is not that easy to get, but if you can get your hands on steak picanha, it won't disappoint. Put it on a rotisserie on a charcoal grill, and getting just a touch of smoke and letting those flames just kiss the steak really gives you a great flavor. That char, the fat, the lean meat, it's a very beefy flavor. Similar to sirloin, but has that touch of filet mignon's tenderness and some of that flavor from ribeye because of the fat cap. Overall, this is a great cut of steak, and not a lot of people know about it. Make sure you keep your seasoning simple and use a high quality charcoal like Fogo. I guarantee you it's gonna be in your top 5 or maybe top 3 favorite cuts of steak. The other thing is, I really enjoyed making this video, and if you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I liked making it, leave me a comment below. Maybe we can do a series or a couple of other videos where I go over some really under the radar cuts of beef that are just amazing that people just don't know about, and you guys can try for yourself. That's it for me, guys. If you found this video informative, please consider subscribing. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care, everybody.